Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Chariwag, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. I am coordinating the paper on sociology in India. Today we are going to discuss the module Middle Class and Globalization. This module has been written by A. Apurva, research scholar, Binghamton University, State University of New York. The module attempts to understand and analyze the character and contour of Indian middle class since the 1990s. That is, in the context of globalization, what are the changes that the Indian middle class is facing, especially in the context of privatization of public resources. Objective: to understand and analyze the attitudes, aspirations and hegemonic role of emerging middle class in India in the era of globalization. Introduction: the module attempts to understand and analyze the character and contour of the Indian middle class since the 1990s, that is, in the context of globalization that entails the dual processes of economic liberalization and privatization of public resources. There are scholarly debates about the contemporary middle class, such as about their identity formation, actual size, consumption patterns, political and ideological inclinations, role in neoliberal development, and their global aspirations. Through these debates and discussions, this module seeks to bring forth the centrality as well as ambivalence attached to the Indian middle classes in the context of globalization, which otherwise suffered from a scant scholarly attention in the pre-90s era. Though the module primarily focuses on the globally mobile urban middle class, it also deliberates on the changing nature of the rural middle class in the wake of globalization. The module provides a brief historical sketch of the formation of the middle class in the colonial and post-colonial period, and then it introduces the theoretical discussions about the nature of contemporary middle class in India. Further, the module broaches specific areas such as economic, political, cultural and spatial to understand the attitude, aspiration and desires of the emerging middle classes in India. 2. Modernity, economic development, the formation of middle classes in India. It is useful to begin with Nehru's famous Tryst with Destiny speech given on the eve of India's independence. Pavan Verma's The Great Indian Middle Class 2007 asked an interesting question. Why did Nehru choose to speak in English when the majority of the people in the newly independent country did not understand the English language? The answer could lie in the power of the colonial modernity and modern education that sought to create a native elite population who were Indian in blood and color but English in taste, in opinions, in morals and in intellect. During the earlier colonial period, a segment of traditional elite acquired new professional skills, including proficiency in the English language, to gain employment in the rungs of the colonial state apparatus as bureaucrats and administrators, while others chose to be doctors and lawyers. This led to the creation of a social and cultural gulf between the newly formed modernist elite living under British patronage, serving the colonial state, and the vernacular-speaking illiterate masses. However, in the early 20th century, the two developments: 1. The middle class, realization of the limited opportunities in occupational mobility in serving the colonial masters, and 2. The concomitant rise of Indian nationalism seeking freedom under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi politicized the middle class. As a result, the middle and upper strata of this professional class was involved in many leadership positions, particularly in the Indian National Congress. In the newly constituted nation, the middle class emerged as a legitimate heir, lording over the state and civil machinery, administration, bureaucracy, judiciary, army and education. Independent India continued with these inherited state apparatus, a relic from the British rule, resulting in the continuity with the colonial order rather than a significant departure from it, both in form and substance. In this context, Aijaz Ahmad 1996 asserted that the middle class, being the upholder of this colonial legacy, pushed not only for the capitalist development but also sought to go beyond its intermediate status to reproduce itself as a dominant class over other classes. Scholars such as Sudipta Kaviraj and Pranab Bardhan reached a slightly different conclusion when they argued that the elite fraction of the middle class was part of the ruling alliance along with the agrarian and industrial capitalist classes in the post-independence period. One of the main functions of this middle class was to articulate the hegemony of the ruling bloc. Such articulations was possible since the middle class not only controlled the state institutions such as bureaucracy, but also sincerely believed in the ideology of capitalist development, which remains socialist only at the level of rhetoric. In sum, during the Nehruvian developmental regime, the middle class was part of a dominant class coalition, both as managers of the ruling bloc and facilitators of development projects for the dominant classes. Further, as Deshpande suggests case, if the elite segment of the middle class was part of the dominant coalition and supporter of modernization projects, its main faction, government employees, salaried workers, lower level professionals, remain engaged in the consumption of ideology produced by the elite segment. Apart from the urban middle classes, there were also a rural town middle class in India. Some call this class as regional capital, where others call it auxiliary classes. Michael Kalecki called this class as intermediate classes, which comprised of small landowners, rich and middle class peasants, merchants of rural and semi-rural townships, small-scale manufacturers and retailers. What happened to the intermediate class in the post-liberalization era? Has this class disappeared as India progressed onto neoliberal lines? Let us engage with these questions later. Contemporary middle classes and the problem of definition and quantification. In this section, we will learn about the criteria that are used to define the contemporary middle class and the problems faced in estimating the size of this class. Scholars writing on the middle class agree that since the beginning of the 1980s, especially since the 1990s, the size of the middle class in India has grown significantly. However, the agreement soon turns into a big disagreement regarding the actual size of the rising middle class. Is it 10 crores, 20 crores or 30 crores or what? Different scholars reach different numbers, which in turn depend upon what criteria and methods they use to enumerate the size of middle class. At this point, one should remember that unlike advanced capitalist countries where the middle class emerged systematically as a middle income group in between the tiny elite and poor, the story of middle class in India is slightly different. As we do not have a reliable methodology yet to estimate the magnitude of this class, one needs to deliberate on this point more deeply. One of the most widely used criteria for defining the middle class and estimating its size is income and wealth. Unfortunately, India does not have a comprehensive list of people's income and wealth, and this makes it difficult to determine the size of this class at the national and regional levels. Can we use the filed income tax return to assess its size? Even today, only a minority in India file income tax returns, which might give some sense of the urban middle class, but still leaves out a vast majority who are exempted from tax both in urban and rural areas. Some of the scholars argue that instead of income, the consumption pattern expenditure is a better indicator of defining the middle class. Hence, they use the consumption expenditure data collected by an SSO, National Sample Survey Organization. Consumption expenditure could be an alternative to income to define the size of middle class, but it has its own set of problems. The problem precisely is this: some middle income groups, especially the lower strata, may use their entire earnings on buying necessary consumer items and may live on credit, while the upper strata of the middle class may save income either to accumulate it or use it in the contingent future. Therefore, relying merely on the consumption expenditure of the middle class may not provide correct estimate of the size of the middle class. What this discussion helps us to understand that use of economic terms, income, wealth and consumption in defined middle class has its own limitation, and one should be aware of the ambiguity that attaches to these concepts when deliberating about the contemporary middle class in India. In this sense, fixing and delimiting the contemporary middle classes from the other class is fuzzy, and as Deshpande puts it, the Indian middle class is more of a symbolic than actual description. Hence, before accepting this everyday term middle class, one must inquire about the underlying assumptions that scholars use to define this class. If there is so much ambiguity attached to the middle class, then how do we proceed to explain this class? Who and what does middle class represent, and what implications one can think of in the Indian context as a majority of population seeks to identify with the emerging middle class? Conceptualizing emerging middle class. We learned that Nehruvian middle class played a vital role in maintaining and articulating the hegemony of the ruling class. Also, the elite faction of the middle class produced ideologies related to the development, while the mass faction of it legitimized and consumed those ideologies without much resistance. To what extent is such a theoretical understanding useful to evaluate the new emerging middle class in India? Two contextual changes need to register. One, the developmental state has reincarnated into a neoliberal state, and thus the question is, does the middle class still articulate hegemony? If yes, then how? Two, the different factions of middle class have evolved differently in the era of globalization, and thus the question is, what has been the implication of globalization on different segments of the middle class? Deshpande argues that middle class transition from development to globalization has been seamless. It also means, as Deshpande suggests and implies, that one can take three separate hypothetical routes to explore, explain and understand the new middle class in the era of globalization. One, by examining the way of contemporary middle class play a hegemonic role. 2. By discovering different segments and layers of the middle class, and 3. By expanding the economic aspects of defining the middle class to incorporate cultural dimensions, that is, middle class as consumers and accumulators of cultural capital. Let us take the question of middle class and hegemony. In order to analyze the relationship between middle class and its hegemonic role, Partha Chatterjee introduces two related conceptual apparatuses: civil society and political society. Chatterjee perceives civil society as institutions and practices which is inhabited and controlled by a few culturally equipped elite members. It is an arena in which most of the inhabitants of India do not qualify for proper membership, even though ideally all Indians are citizens and bearers of constitutional rights. It does not mean, Chatterjee argues, that non-members of civil society are outside or excluded from the politics of the state. A major thrust of his argument is that this population, outsider to the civil society but insider to the domain of politics, still needs to be governed, managed and controlled by the state, and this situation puts this subaltern population into a different political relationship with the state. To understand this political process and relationship between state and managed population, Chatterjee proposes the notion of political society. But what has middle class got to do with civil society and political society? It is argued that in the era of globalization, the new emerging and globally mobile middle class has hegemonic control over the institutions of civil society. School, colleges, university, urban citizen groups, religious places, market and media, and thus it dominates and articulates the agenda of neoliberal development and Hindutva ideology, whose implications we will discuss shortly. Another useful concept to understand the new emerging Indian middle class is Bourdieu's cultural capital, which is an invisible, non-tangible property. In the Indian context, Deshpande argues that cultural capital may consist of identities, caste, community and region, or competencies, educational qualifications, linguistic and other skills, which carry three attributes to property. 1. Tangibility and psychological benefits. 2. They can be privatized, and 3. They can be handed over to newer generations. No wonder in globalized India, both the elite and mass faction of middle class attempt to advance through professional credentials or through accumulated cultural capital. The relationship between middle class and cultural capital brings forth the merit, efficiency and reservation debate in the domain of private sector employment, which we will discuss below. Finally, the rising middle class in India needs to be seen as lifestyle consumers whose expensive consumer choices are antithesis to the idea of renunciation and exhibition of materialist tendencies prevalent in the thoughts of Gandhi and his disciples. In sum, the new middle class in India has to be explored and assessed in terms of the following possible theses. The new middle class is a socially and a politically distinct class which attempts to articulate hegemony and reproduces its privileges by accumulating social capital and by being a consumerist class that aspires to live in a world-class cities. Globalization and the middle class. Let us look at a few scholarly works which attempt to give us an insight on the above mentioned issues. In this section, we will also discuss few other dimensions and aspects of the emerging middle class and globalized India. Neoliberal economic development and the new middle class. The sustained economic growth after the opening up of Indian economy in 1991 has reincarnated the economic, political and cultural image of the middle class. Supporters of the economic liberalization see a significant relationship between economic growth and economic success of middle class. They argue that India's 30 crore strong middle class is a sizable market for foreign investment, and introduction of new commodities and opportunities for consumers will further benefit not only this class but also India as a whole. Being the prime recipients of the benefits of economic liberalization and privatization, this class strongly supports neoliberal development and casts eyes full of contempt while discussing the pre-1990s era of license Raj and socialist development. On the other hand, detractors of liberalization have cautioned against the excessive consumerist attitude of the middle class and have raised questions regarding middle class fading social and moral responsibility towards a nation. Though the relationship between economic liberalization and middle class is generally asserted as a process that has benefited the latter, one should avoid treating the liberalized middle class as one homogeneous group. One should seek out new research on this theme that may separately analyze the middle classes based in metropolitan areas, towns and in rural areas. Furthermore, one should remember that any analysis of the relationship between economic liberalization and the middle class will further be complicated by existing social hierarchies of caste, gender, region, religion and language. We will cover up some of these complexities in the sections below, but to sum up this section, a good starting point is to think about the rising new middle classes in India is this. First, a majority of them are proponents of economic liberalization and reap the benefits of this process. Second, their newness lies not in the social basis, since structural components of the old and the new middle class remain the same. Rather, their newness and distinctiveness lies in the social, cultural and political attitudes and aspirations, in lifestyles and pattern of consumption, and in a growing amnesia about the marginalized sections of the society that reflects in the politics of forgetting. Fernandez. Middle class politics, democracy and Hindutva. Alam in Who Wants Democracy raises a point regarding the limited participation of middle class in electoral politics. The middle class disenchantment with democratic politics is not surprising, since it perceives that the democratic model of India serves only the marginal and the poor. Nonetheless, the middle class perception that Indian democracy is ill-suited to the progress and achievement does not mean that the middle class is not politically inclined. Scholars who have worked on the political economy of India in the last 2 decades have suggested that the rising middle class have transformed from a politically marginal voice to an assertive central voice in Indian politics, supporting not only economic liberalization but also Hindu nationalism, especially the works of Corbridge and Harris. For example, the arguments surrounding the Ram Janambhoomi issue and the demolition of Babri Masjid in 1992 resulted in communal riots in many parts of India. The middle class may have disapproved the act of violence, but many of them helped create the conditions of communal tensions, especially by believing in the theory of minority appeasement that led to the demolition of Babri Masjid in the first place and ensuing communal violence. Pankaj Mishra in Butter Chicken in Ludhiana found that the rising middle class in small towns and cities had not only internalized communal sentiments but actively supported the cause of BJP anti-secular political program. In other words, it is a new middle class that supports privatization, advocates cutting off subsidies for the poor, and vocally expresses dissatisfactions with parliamentary democracy. Or if they favor democracy, then it gets articulated in a new political language of middle class that promotes exclusionary forms of citizenship, that is, a democracy without demands from the poor, Dalit, tribal groups and religious minorities. Reading the recent trends in Indian politics, it appears that in the last 2 decades, the BJP and its NDA allies have captured a political space where they have gained allegiance from the middle class and their political aspirations and choices. A middle class that long ago abandoned the political program of declining left and the Congress party. Urban politics and planning is another arena where the new middle class raises its concern vehemently through civil society institutions. Being a strong political voice in shaping the urban planning and globalized India, the political attitude of middle class has already started altering the dynamics of urban politics. It is evident in the following observation made by activist and architect from Mumbai, P.K. Das. He notes, outfits of citizen groups representing small and exclusive groups of middle and upper classes are now intervening in housing sector. The strategy is to oppose those policies of government relating to the campaign to the right of housing, upgradation of slums and protection against eviction. These groups and leadership influence the media too. They campaign in the press against the interest of the slum dwellers. In the recent past, many such groups have organized campaigns in the press to oppose the government policy to recognize the residential rights of the slum dwellers and the right to rehabilitation of those who are evicted by the development programs of the state. Similarly, new scholarship has noticed active citizenry groups of middle class that not only use the press or media but also file petitions in courts against slum dwellers. Scholars have highlighted in a large number of cases how the judiciary has ruled in the favor of middle class who see slums as an unhygienic obstacle in the process of beautification and urban development. Cultural aspiration, attitude and consumerist middle class. Can we say that the attitude of middle class is one of siege mentality, especially where the engagement with civic activities is limited? This is what Verma concludes after Mishra's reading of the rising middle class in Butter Chicken in Ludhiana. He writes, the middle class is escapist and nurtures a sense of siege mentality. If the unwashed masses seem to be climbing up the garden wall, raise the height of the wall. If there is not enough supply of water, dig a tube well or add a water tank. Or best of all, siphon off the supply with a pump on the municipal line itself, irrespective of the consequences to others. If electricity is deficient, install a generator or illegally increase the sanction load by bribing to the local electrical substation. The emphasis was on finding a shortcut, quick fix solution which had to be efficacious even if unethical. This observation sums up the middle class attitude towards civic responsibility in smaller towns and cities. Is the middle class attitude and aspiration different in the metropolitan cities? Unlike the provincial middle class, the aspiring and ambitious metropolitan middle class is analyzed not only as a social group that brought about the ideas of a neoliberal ethic of intense possessive individualism, but also who pursues lifestyle and quantity of urban life as one of the commodities in the urban market. that can be acquired to enhance their social status. In the cities, the aspiring and globally mobile middle class prefers to live in gated communities and private villas, and it seeks to justify the spatial planning of the low-density, green, luxurious, gated community by invoking issue of general insecurity, unhygienic conditions, and as a means to replicate the lifestyle of advanced capitalist countries. It is in this social group which is the main consumer of the new urban culture built around shopping malls, theme parks, restaurants, multiplexes. Scholars have argued that the erstwhile plural and internally differentiated middle class in the metropolitan area have gradually transforming into singular and homogeneous middle class group primarily identified in terms of the consumption habits. It is this social group that defies Gandhism and strong anti-consumerist rhetoric in India. Some scholars have extended the argument to show that urban consumption habits of the new middle class in a globalized India have become a way to reproduce their cultural capital and earn symbolic capital. This has had an implication on the re-strategizing inner city development by real estate companies. These companies have vigorously used cultural means like art galleries, shopping malls, residence, restaurants, and employ creative culture industries to attract the middle class to produce a gentrified inner city. For example, in Mumbai, the now defunct but centrally located cotton textile mills, the Phoenix Mills of 1905 has now transformed into one of Asia's largest shopping malls, the Phoenix Mall. Caste and the new middle class values. If the 1990s marked the period of economic liberalization, the rise of new middle class in India, the Hindu nationalism which is discussed above, then mandalization of Indian politics complemented the emerging new picture or image of India. The implementation of Mandal Commission report in 1990 entitled the OBC or the backward classes to reservation of seats in public sector employment, which was hitherto dominated by the upper caste groups. The new legal provision of reservations for OBCs facilitated the entrance of lower middle caste into the middle class status, however, with one marked difference from the earlier period. If the earlier lower caste Sanskritized the lifestyle to achieve upper caste status, then now the entry to the middle class status required an imitation and reproduction of the middle class lifestyle based primarily on economic and cultural capital. D.L. Sheth argues that this process of classicization of caste was crucial to the formation of the new middle class in India, which involved a. de-ritualization of caste, b. acquisition of new middle class identity, which is consumption based, and c. economic interest and lifestyle choice more akin to the middle class than to a fellow non-middle class caste person. He further argues that the secularization of caste has led to the formation of new middle class, but still caste identity has not faded. Rather, it operates in combination with a newly acquired middle class identity. How caste and class identity work in conjunction can be seen in contemporary private sector jobs. Since the 1990s, the emerging middle class has sought these relatively well-paying employment opportunities in the private sector such as IT professionals. One of the core values that this class publicly upholds is merit and efficiency, along with rejection of caste reservations, since for them such provision dilutes the merit and efficiency of jobs. This secular modern language, merit and efficiency of the new middle class, is interesting to observe since no middle class working professional would readily admit the legitimacy of caste hierarchy, even though it is this caste hierarchy that gave middle class, mostly belonging to the upper caste, historical advantage to earn economic, social and cultural capital. Upadhyay's empirical research on the IT industry in Bengaluru break the myth of representation in which IT companies are shown to be providing job opportunities to the wider sections of the society. Rather, she argues that majority of the workforce in IT is homogeneous and belongs to urban middle class and a high middle caste. Further, she argues that ideology of merit is a prevalent practice in recruitment for IT jobs and thus becomes a ground for exclusion of people from disadvantaged social and economic background. Middle class women. In the context of globalization, middle class families are undergoing a transitory period. Feminist scholars have examined and documented the role of urban middle class women in such families. However, the observable trends still need to be theorized, especially around marriage and gender roles. The neoliberal economic model and concomitant privatization have ushered the educated middle class women to join the workforce as it provided them with much needed economic independence. This is a much changed gender structure, particularly from the pre-90s era, and dual earnings, both by men and women, in many urban nuclear families have put the traditional family and gender norms under stress. Working middle class women are found to be engaging in the second shift at home after the day's work at the office, or at least they have to make sure that the home is in order with the help of a domestic help. The increasing frustration and resentment among middle class women due to this new family situation, which still remain largely patriarchal, is leading to tensions and possible implosion of traditional marriages as we knew it, where working wives refuse to perform the traditional gender roles. Rural middle class. Harris White argues that the intermediate classes in the small towns and villages are still structurally powerful local capital who have a large stake in the capitalist development project. However, they exercise their power primarily not through political parties but rather collusively in overlapping organizations of diverse kinds, cultural, cooperative, philanthropic as well as trade associations. Harris White reaches a tentative conclusion about the future of intermediate classes. She summarizes that the upper section of the intermediate classes may develop interest in regional stock exchanges and agro-food industries and may use its cultural and political influence to compete with monopoly capital, while the rest may support Swadeshi against FDIs and Hindutva to suit their interest. While it is clear that the intermediate classes have not yet shown signs of significant decline in the era of globalization, what remains inconclusive is whether they should be able to slow down the neoliberal onslaught on local economics and whether they would be completely transformed into a new class with new class interests. This remains to be seen, and further research exploring the relationship between globalization, urbanization and consumer values of the rural middle class can provide a way to assess the future of this class. Conclusion. In neoliberal reinvention of India after the 1990s, the new middle class has not only claimed but also achieved a bigger stake in the affairs of India's political and economic development. This class is devoted to the idea of economic liberalization, privatization and is receptive to the idea of Hindu nationalism. In this sense, a riding middle class becomes a part of the elite revolt by discarding Nehruvian vision of a democratic, secular and plural India. The political conservatism of the new middle class is only one side of the story. The other side of the story frames a globally mobile middle class as a consumerist class which has long abandoned the idea of austerity for its relentless material pursuits. It is this class which aspires for world-class lifestyles and not only chooses to live in luxurious gated communities but also wishes Indian cities to be like Shanghai and Singapore without realizing the implications of such a thought on the marginalized sections of the society. One should remember that the new middle class is not structurally new, which means that like earlier times this class is still dominated by the middle and upper caste groups. What makes them new is their economic, political and cultural attitudes and aspirations. For example, if the old middle class sought public sector bank jobs and civil services position, the new middle class aspires towards jobs in multinationals. If the old middle class believed in the idea of India with hegemonic aspirations, the new middle class political attitude is revolt against Nehruvian idea of India and create a new hegemony. If the old middle class, especially its mass faction, lived in austerity, the new middle class identity and status are marked by their consumerist inclination. Finally, the rural middle class, comprising of many intermediate classes, has not yet transformed totally. Rather, it has shown resilience against the processes of economic liberalization. After discussing middle classes and globalization, the students of sociology can take away many issues that compound sociologists in India. For example, when we talk about middle classes in India, we need to understand that it is extremely difficult and tenuous to quantify who the middle class is. We have to base our study on various scholars who have differently understood the whole concept of middle class. The whole processes of globalization, neoliberalism, consumerism has changed the manner in which the new middle class is approaching their own identity. Rather than looking at themselves in terms of a part of the larger Indian structure, they are trying to create separate islands for themselves and thereby completely rejecting the socialist visions of Nehruvian era. Thank you.